අයිබෝන් දරුවනේ සුබ රාත්‍රියක් කියලා ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. අද මම ඔයාලට මේ ස්ක්‍රීන් එක ෂෙයා වෙලා පේනවා ඇති. මේකෙන් අද වෙන්නේ මම ඔයාලට ස්ක්‍රීන් එක ෂෙයා වෙලා තියෙනවා. මං කියන සමහර වචන අද පැටලෙන්න පුළුවන් හේතුව මම තරමක් දුරට අසනීප තත්ත්වයෙන් පසුවන නිසා. ඒක නිසා එතකොට ඔයාලගේ මේ යන්නේ ඉන්ට්‍රොඩක්ෂන් එකක් ඇටැක් සයිඩ් එකෙන් අපි කොහොමද ප්‍රතිව්‍යාධියාට අපේ ගුණුව අපි කොහොමද ගන්න කියන එක. ඒ කියන්නේ ටූර්නමන්ට් එකකට අපි ගේම් එකකට ගිහපුවාම ඒ රවුන්ඩ් එකේ අපි කොහොමද අපේ ඔපෝනන්ට් අපි ප්‍රතිවාදියාට අපි කොහොමද එයාට ෆේස් කරන්නේ රයිට්. මේ ගේම් එක ඊෆෝ එකක් ඇද්දොත් රයිට් මෙයා මේක ඒක ඇද්දට පස්සේ කින් සයිඩ් එකට එන්න ඕනේ ඇටැක් එක මේකයි කියන එක ඉතින් අද ඔයාලට කියලා දෙනවා right.
Actually, I have recorded already one DVD on calculation training and one other DVD on extreme calculation training. So what is this DVD all about and why would we need to have another DVD on this topic? Well, first of all, the reason I record another two DVDs on this topic is I believe you can never have enough training on improving your calculation abilities. It's very important to be fresh, to be flexible, to find interesting ideas at the board, be resourceful whenever you're on the attack, but also when you're on the defensive side. So that's the reason why I've made this two-volume
මම හිතනවා මේකේ ගොඩක් වෙන්නේ ඉංග්‍රීසි මීඩියම් කරන දරුවෝනේ. එතකොට ඒ දරුවන්ට මේක අපහසුතාවයක් නොවේ කියලා මම හිතනවා. සිංහල ඇත්තටම යූස් කරන දරුවෝ හරි අඩුයිනේ. එතකොට ඒක නිසා තමයි මම මේක දෙන්නේ. මෙයා මේකේ ඉන්ට්‍රොඩක්ෂන් එක කරලා කොහොමද මේක යන්නේ කියන එක මේ බෝඩ් චෙස් බෝඩ් එකේ ඔයාලා ෂෙයා වෙන එකේ ස්ක්‍රීන් එකේ ෂෙයා වෙන ඒකේ පෙන්නනවා. බලමු.
DVD with a lot of exercises because that is the main purpose of this DVD series. That I don't want to talk a lot. Of course, there are on both DVDs some introductory examples where I explain some typical things you will get to see in this video series. But the most important thing, of course, is that you get the chance to challenge yourself with a lot of exercises. In fact, 66 in total, and most of them they contain multiple questions. And the interesting thing, personally, what I think is that the interactive format of ChessBase is really a good platform for discussing this particular topic, because it's not only we're looking at attacking play, you also got to find the best resources in defense to defend successfully. And in most of these multiple questions, you get a challenge for yourself to find a good move in the attack. But if you do something wrong, you also get a chance to find the refutation of that particular idea. So that's what I think is very interesting, and that's why the interactive format is a great tool for practicing this. So what are the topics? It's about attack and defense, obviously, and how does it differ from the other DVDs? Well, in the other two DVDs on calculation training and extreme calculation training, I talked about principles like candidate moves, eliminating your candidate moves, and the process to find the right continuations. Well, in these two DVDs, I'm talking also about to understand what is the problem, what are you needing to solve, to include all your pieces into the attack, to understand what is the piece doing, how can it be effectively placed to help in the attack, but at the same time also in defense. So we talk about the multi-fractionality of pieces. ideas to generate multiple threats. Of course, if you have a single threat, it will be much easier for the opponent to deal with the situation than in case of dealing with multiple threats. So that's of course also a very important attacking tool. Ignoring the threat is of course a very important theme whenever we are building up the initiative. So that is extensively covered in this series as well. And then there are also other topics, for instance, like some psychological points of talking on intuition versus calculation, as very often we are not able to calculate, but when do you say to yourself, okay, now I trust my calculation, or I rely on my intuition. So you need to try to find a balance with that. But of course, since the topic is calculation, you can already expect that you will be challenged to calculate as much as possible. But intuition, of course, plays also an important role in the calculation process. Then there are also situations where people like me in the past who were like lazy, didn't really find it worth investing a lot of time calculating. But then you will realize you don't get the most out of the position. If you just play like a control freak, then you're not going to be successful. So I have also an interesting example of not being afraid, and just try to go to some dangerous moments. But in the end, you will get rewarded by by your brave approach. In a lot of examples, we also get to see, as I already said, situations where both sides are on the attack and you need to combine your attacking ideas with the defensive ones. Sometimes you need to seize the initiative yourself first with the help of forcing moves, but also you got sometimes to make some moves controlling your own defensive play first, and then after having the situation under control, it is time to build up and attack yourself. So again, I think you will have a lot of fun with these exercises. There are really difficult positions, in fact. So I hope at least as a warning, that you will not feel discouraged when the level is too high. Also, an advantage of the interactive format is that we can go step by step. You don't always have to calculate 10 moves ahead, which is of course interesting for the stronger players to challenge themselves. On the other hand, if you consider yourself in the lower category, then it's actually very nice to have this possibility of finding the right move, and after that, play it on the board, and you get a chance to work out the next questions as well without the need to visualize all the different possibilities. So that's more or less what you can expect, and I'm very happy with the content of this DVD. I think there's a lot of new material. Most of the examples I have chosen are from the years 2020 and 2021. Maybe a few examples from earlier tournaments, but in general, a lot of new content which hasn't been published before in any of my other works. So that is interesting to consider. So for now, I would like to invite you to join me through the first examples. I wish you a lot of fun with the two volume DVDs on calculation in attack and defense. And well, hopefully you'll be successful with it and learn a thing or two. Thanks for now, and let's now get into the action. Whenever you're conducting an attack, you also need to take into account the opponent's resources. And that's what I would like to discuss with you in this first example. I've decided to have a look at the game of Lucas van Verreest against Aaron Lamy from the Tata Steel tournament, the B group in 2019. When you look at the position, you see that White's pieces are really nicely placed in the center and looking at ideas to strike against the black king's position, right? So you see the rooks on the f-file, you see the bishop and the queen on this diagonal, also the knight on d4 is nicely placed. So basically everything looks really nice here for white. So now we are looking at candidate moves, and one of the first moves which springs to mind is to eliminate the knight on f6 in order to make sure that the queen is able to get in to h7. So let's try to see what happens there. Let's try it to calculate from the head. So it's about rook takes f6. Let's say the bishop will recapture, the queen comes in to h7, and now the black king goes to f8. So you can probably visualize this position. This is very important because this is the point where we really need to understand what is actually going on. White is about to give checkmate, but let's continue the line. After queen h8, king to e7, we see we can give another check with rook to e1, but now the problem is that the bishop is already on f6, so can block the check with bishop to e5. So let's put up this variation. So rook takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen h7, king f8, and now continuing the line with a number of checks would be really nice if it would lead to checkmate, but the problem is that black is not going to play king d7, but because there is the move bishop a4 check, and we are going to win the rook on e8, but instead of going with the king to d7, there is this move bishop to e5, and well, this is still a very interesting position, which could be analyzed even further if let's say white would take with the queen on g7. There is still quite reasonable compensation for the exchange, but things are not so clear, and it's really questionable whether you should calculate this line any further. So let's go back. So when we are looking at the initial position, we understand that if you just play forcing moves, then the black king may be able to escape to the center. So then the second thing you come up with is trying to be able to enter with your queen into black's position, but without allowing the king to escape. Let's see how that is possible. So we are continuing with the line. We already looked at, so rook takes f6, bishop takes f6, queen to h7, and now king to f8. So we see queen h8 is met by king e7. So the ideal move would be to cover the e7 square, and that can be done by playing the move knight f5. This would be a brilliant move because there's not much you can do against the threat of queen h8. But look at the position. Wait a second. What did we do wrong now? There is still a defense for black by capturing the rook on f1. The rook on f1 is unprotected, and for that reason, there's no chance at all to play knight f5. because of the checkmate idea. We are going back to the initial position and we try to understand what is actually going on. So we are very close. I mean, we can sacrifice on f6. It's almost checkmate, but there is a problem we are experiencing in this position. And that is the rook on f1 becomes unprotected after sacrificing on f6 and bringing the queen to h7. If we can solve that problem, then it would be really, really great. But in order to make sure that the rook is safe, it would have to move to a safer square, or we just got to make sure that queen on h3 is no longer able to capture the rook on f1. So that is definitely a critical situation. Now we understand what we need to do, because for instance, if you would play a rook move, I would say, let's say a move like rook g1, which is actually not such a bad move, but it's not as forcing as we were hoping for, because now black does get a chance to close the diagonal, and now the threats on the b1 h7 diagonal, they have simply been buried. All right, so we still try to think about forcing moves. We really would like to keep the momentum and deflect the attacking pieces from capturing the rook on f1. And now there is like a brilliant move which was missed in the game by both players, as the way to deflect the queen from h3 is by playing here the move g3 to g4. And this is an excellent move because it threatens to capture the queen. And now basically there are only two moves: queen takes g4 and queen to h4 in order not to lose the queen. Of course, the most sensible option is queen takes g4, but now the big difference is that, well, we lost that pawn on the g file, but we are able to execute that exact line we had in mind. So after rook takes f6, black got to capture, otherwise he's just a piece down. And now after queen h7, king f8, knight to f5, we see that there's no queen on h3 to capture the rook. There's a mating threat on h8. Well, the only way to stop the mate here still, apart from giving up your queen, which is not the ideal solution, you could consider here the move g6. It is actually important to have spotted that defensive idea to cover the h8 square with the bishop. But now the line continues with another interesting move, as you can simply capture with the knight on h6, threatening the queen and threatening to give checkmate. For instance, if you would play now the move queen to d7, well, there are various moves to consider here. Well, let's see what could be the best option. Well, actually, interesting point, guys. Do you see what is the best move here? How do we further increase the pressure on black's position? Because we would like to give mate. I don't think you want to take on f6, because there is rook to e1, and after king to g2, well, there's perhaps another check still. Well, I suppose this should still be winning for white, but nevertheless, let's focus on the position after queen to d7. We would like to give mate. How do we deflect the defender here, attack that piece, and then you see that bishop a4 is actually a very nice follow-up, as after queen takes a4, it will be checkmate, while if you would go to e7, then it takes away the escape square from the black king, so it will be checkmate on g8. So bishop a4 is a very nice move. For instance, if you go queen to c7, now there are a couple of options, but the simplest one is now to give a check on g8, and after king e7, we will capture on f7 with the point that after king to d8, it is checkmate. So we, rather than trying to win back material, we are keep playing for the mating attack. Obviously, this is a very difficult line to see, but it starts with the initial position where you got to understand what the defensive ideas are for black and how you can prevent these options. That is absolutely crucial. Well, in the game, Lucas didn't apply that particular thinking technique and just played a nice move. So basically, you're blocking the F file. That the queen could simply come back to d1 as it opens up the diagonal for the bishop on c2. Queen is trapped and black is forced to give up material. Anyway, what we will get to see in most of these examples is that before looking at moves, we really got to try to understand what is going on. Whenever we have an idea, try to determine what is the cause, why it isn't working, and well, eliminating the defensive option by trading off the defender or deflecting the defender or move away a piece with gain of time, intermediate moves. All these sorts of moves, they are really useful to keep the momentum and continue with your own attacking ideas. So that's what we get to see basically in all the examples. But when you're attacking, you also got to think about your own defense. And that queen on h3 was really annoying in this example. And well, once White would have realized that is the main problem, he could have actually first deflected the queen before executing that decisive mating attack. In really sharp positions, for instance, with opposite castled kings, major pieces on the board, also with the presence of opposite colored bishops, it's very important to be fast and sense the urgency of the position, as you need to act very quickly. On the other hand, we should never really forget to include all our pieces into the attack, because that will give our attack a boost. That's something which is interestingly seen in the following game between Lanier Dominguez against Anish Giri from the World Rapid Championships in 2019. We have a razor sharp Sicilian with opposite castled kings, and basically both sides have prepared their major pieces to open up the files towards their enemy's king. It's White to move in this position, and we get to see some very interesting lines. But let's try to understand what is going on. As I said, there are open files for the major pieces, and White is looking for similar plans on the king side. It's White to play, and when analyzing this position with my students, I realized that my students came up with a very natural move. They really wanted to start here with the move h5, opening the files, and it feels like White is actually faster to open the enemy's king's position. However, Black also is not without chances here, because his major pieces are doing incredibly well, and it's very important to react well to this move h5. Well, one of the key points of this move h5 is that if Black would play something like g5, trying to keep the files closed, there is a move like queen e4 with fantastic control over the light squares. That's going to be decisive, and basically the same can actually be concluded from the move g takes h5. It's possible to capture on on h5, but also the move queen e4 is really nice, because it sets up a battery of queen and bishop. We have actually seen that in that example of Lucas against Aaron Lamy as well. But also, it really prevents the bishop, the dark squared bishop for Black, to become active. And that is actually the key weapon for Black in this position, because rather than reacting to the White's plans on the king side, Black has a really nice idea here based on the move e4. And hopefully you have seen that idea, because this is so typical for sharp positions that with the fianchetto bishop, it's usually a very important defender of its own king, but it will also become a really strong attacking piece if possible, particularly when it doesn't get any opposition from White's dark square bishop. So what is the concrete point of this move e4? Well, if you would take with the queen, which looks very nice, Black has given up the pawn, but as I already said, that bishop is really really looking nice on g7. And do you see the following continuation here for Black, as he has this brilliant shot of rook takes a2. And now we see, of course, the point that Black is threatening to take on b2, followed by queen a3. So here we see the strength of that bishop on g7. No chance for White to capture on g6 himself. If you would take on a2, there is the move rook to a8. The other rook comes over with check, king to b1. And now there is the idea of playing rook to a1, deflecting the king to step into the long diagonal, which means that the pawn on b2 is pinned. So there is queen to a3. No chance to capture the queen at all. And it's Black who is giving checkmate. And that is all because of the inclusion of the dark squared bishop. Even when pieces are close to your king, like long range pieces like rooks, bishops, or even queens, they can work on the entire board and be multifunctional. So e4 would be really a great idea. There are several other lines, but this is one key idea I wanted to show to you. For instance, black after king takes a2, rook a8. White is not obliged to go back with the king to b1. He may even consider playing queen a4, giving back material. But then there is rook takes a4, b takes, rook takes a4, b takes a4, and now queen takes d5, which is going to win a second bishop as well. So that's going to be decisive too. So here we see a very interesting idea, that move e4 that could likely be a decisive shot for black. Now let's go back to the position after the move, the initial position, because we can conclude that h5 is not the most precise move, and white should also anticipate the opponent's actions. And for that reason, Dominguez instead played here the move queen to e4. In a way, very understandable to set up a blockade on the light squares. But how strong is that blockade, in fact? Because after queen e4, black played here the move f5. This is the key idea, that if the queen moves, we are ready to play e4. Even if queens would get exchanged, things are looking pretty decent here for black. But obviously, white's idea by playing the move queen e4 was to sacrifice the rook. On f5. Very nice idea. And this is another interesting point, because things are looking incredibly dangerous for black. And let's see what happened in the game before we are analyzing the position any further. Because g takes f5 is the most obvious move, of course, just to grab the material. But now after queen takes f5, suddenly white has a very strong attack along these light squares. So this looks very dangerous. If you would decide now to play a move like e4, with the idea to open up the diagonal again, my recommendation would be to, before capturing on e4, to insert a very clever check. Don't automatically recapture. Look at all your possibilities. Queen e6 is very nice. King has to go to h8. If it goes to the f file, it would be checkmated, obviously. But now after queen takes e4, the threat of queen h7 is even stronger, as it comes with checkmate. So yeah, this is not going to end well for black. Let's go back to the position after queen takes f5, as instead, well, there are some other options instead of e4. If you would play, let's say, something like rook f8, attacking the queen, I will go with my queen to h7, king to f7, and my question to you, what would you play here now? Very important not to believe that there's one logical move. There's always more to see, because if you would play the move rook f1, I'm happily coming back with my king to e8, trying to run away, and it's not going to be checkmate soon. Instead, what is more clever is to bring another piece into the attack with bishop to g6, which prevents the king from getting back to e8. If it goes to f6, there is rook f1, and after king e7, everything is coming with check. Queen takes g7, king d8, and it's going to be mate. And the same, of course, can be said in the line with king e7 instead of king f6, because there's queen takes g7 with mate to follow. So this looks very convincing to me. Rook f8 is not the best move. In the game, Giri played here the move rook c7. Interesting idea. Now we got to be very precise, because this is another moment to think of what white can do and if black does have any threat. So the idea behind this move is that after something like queen h7, black will play his king to f8 this time, with the difference that after rook to f1, the rook is able to interfere along the 7th, and well, once major pieces are getting traded, well, at best probably you have a perpetual, but this is not what white had been looking for. So queen h7 doesn't seem to be convincing at all. That was the most obvious queen check. How about queen e6 then? Well, now the point is that the rook can block on f7 again, and after rook to f1, black can just bring more defenders to protect that rook. Even after attacking with the bishop on g6, black is in time to bring another piece back, covering the f7 rook. So this is not going to end well for white. So that looks like it's problematic. But here, again, like in the example of Lucas van Verreest against Arian Lamy, it's very important to look at quiet moves as well to understand what the defensive ideas are. And making sure that all your pieces are having a clear task is really important. And looking at the position, the rook on h1 isn't doing much on the h file, being blocked by its own pawn. So Dominguez came up with a very nice idea to start here with the move rook to f1. It's absolutely a key idea, trying to catch the black king in a mating net. Queen h7 is the main threat, no chance to escape. So black played here the move bishop f8, so that we see the point of that rook on c7, covering several important squares on the 7th rank. But the question is it enough to hold the position together? After queen to g6, black played here the move king h8, and after queen h5, there followed here the move king to g8 again. Of course, you cannot go to g7 because that runs into queen h7 with checkmate. So we are going to g8. But here again, this is a very important moment, and the question is, what is the strongest move now for white? Does black have actually a threat? First of all, we look at forcing moves, but we also see that if you just give checks with your queen, it's not leading to anything special. And of course, also the move rook g1 is just buried by the queen on c5. Also, activating a rook along one of the ranks is not really good, because there is a counter threat on c1. So then again, we look at this position. Does black have a threat? The answer is no. I don't think there is a clear threat. Of course, whenever you make a move and something changes in the position, you got to check that again. But that also means that we have time to improve our pieces again, bring more pieces into the attack. And well, with one very clever move, Dominguez could have won the game much easier than he actually did. There is this brilliant idea of playing bishop f5, trying to infiltrate along the light squares, which is a typical thing to do, obviously in opposite color bishop positions. Black is vulnerable there, and white's bishop is really great. There's not much you can do against this. Threat of bishop to e6. And after, let's say, something like queen takes d5, there is the point of playing queen to g6. And if you go king h8, there is this brilliant idea to go bishop e6 with a double attack of mate and taking the queen. After rook to g7, there is queen h6 with check, rook to h7, and now we are going to give checkmate. So this is a beautiful line, very difficult, but it's also about realizing that your opponent doesn't have any threats, and then you have the possibility to get some new, fresh attacking pieces to the battlefield. There are many other lines as well, but I would like actually to come back to that position after queen e4, f5, and now rook takes f5, because we quickly went through the critical line. Of course, you got to consider the move g takes f5 first. Of course, capturing material is a critical line, but we have seen that it's really dangerous, and it gives black the chance, white the chance, sorry, to build up an attack on the light squares. Now, after rook takes f5, capturing is not obliged, and instead, we have this brilliant idea again to look for counterplay. And look what is possible now. There is the option to take on a2. It was missed by both players. And of course, it's really difficult to keep control, especially in a shorter time control. But let's first have a look at king takes a2, because now the trick is to take on f5. And what is the difference between these two moves? Well, black has sacrificed a rook back, so he's no material up, but he does get a brilliant chance to play for an attack himself as well, not fearing the move rook f1, queen h7, because in this position, again, black can insert that move e4. Fantastic idea to hit the bishop on d3. Whatever white does, for instance, if you take on e4, again, we have that idea to play rook a1. That is the big difference. Having sacrificed on a2 in between, there is this mating motive. Where black is actually faster with the execution of that mating combination. So, very, very interesting line. After rook takes a2, we are not at the end of the line, but we understand that king takes a2 is really dangerous. For that reason, probably the critical move here would be to play rook f8, an intermediate move, which looks very clever, with the point that g takes f5 will not force the queen to leave the blockading square e4. Now, what is going on after this move, rook f8? There are a couple of ways to recapture, but by far the best and safest move is rook takes f8. And now after king takes a2, that queen looks quite stable on e4. But look what black is going to do now. There is the move rook f4, fighting for the initiative, forcing the queen to go away. After taking on g6, I mean, the most logical move, I would say, black plays here the move e4, opening that diagonal again. And we are looking for ways to build up a devastating attack. Now, typically for such positions with attack and counterattack, you don't really want to move the bishop, but you play here the move rook to g1, setting up that threat against g7. So ignoring the threat for a higher threat is, of course, a typical thing to consider. Now look what's going on. We are protecting that bishop on g7. And now we have to be careful. If you take with the queen on e4, there is queen takes g1. So we are going to take with the bishop on e4. And let's pause here. Let's see what are the key ideas for black to generate an attack. Does white have a threat? Well, it seems there's only one check on h7, and then the king can hide on f8. Everything looks okay. The bishop is a very important defender still. But what are the weaknesses? Well, let's have a look. There is the move queen to d4. Very, very nice idea, with the point that after rook g2, we have now weakened the back rank. The king is vulnerable there. And after queen a7, king to b1, rook to c1, things seem not to end well here for black. So it's still very, very tricky, of course. But you get an idea how play is getting going back and forth. After queen to d4, there are other options. For instance, you can consider a move queen g2, trying to keep both the first and the second rank defended. But now we see there is rook f2 at least. And again, I like the multifunctionality of the queen on d4, threatening mate, also defending on the dark squares on the long diagonal. So white would be forced to give up the exchange, and that leads to a better and perhaps even winning endgame for black. A lot of tactics going on here, but we see every tempo matters, but it also starts with the idea that you need to include such bishop on g7, and in general you've got to include all your pieces. That's what white had to do in this example anyway. We have seen it on various occasions, like you have sacrificed the rook, but even then ideas like rook f1, quiet move, keeping the king out of the center, not allowing it to escape there, and also that other move, bishop f5, was really, really nice, just to bring another bishop into the attack. So these kind of themes, they like very sensible ideas. They should be applied also in really sharp positions when it's all about calculation. So I hope this will help you also to find a lot of interesting solutions when you're solving the test exercises. In the following example, I'm playing here with the black pieces in a training game against my long-term student, Arthur de Winter, who's actually the strongest player in the Netherlands under 14 years old, national champion, and having represented the Netherlands on various occasions already at the European championships. He's a very talented player with a good sense for tactical play. And whenever I'm playing training games with him, I also like to get really sharp positions with chances for both sides to develop a good sense for both attack and defense. So the following position was actually not seen in the game, but it's taken from the analysis of this game, and it's interesting to have a look at the position. It's white to play, and you can see that white is actually currently a piece up, and it's a really sharp position. And well, in such positions, of course, material matters, but the safety of the king is definitely more important. So the question is what white should do here, and of course it's possible, for instance, to capture a rook. Let's say you play here rook takes c8. Now black has various options. He may even consider to take back on c8 with the rook, but definitely much stronger is to take first on f4, also capturing a piece, and more importantly, threatening checkmate. Now the diagonal has opened for the dark squared bishop. White should move the king to c1, but in that case, it's just time to pick up the bishop on c8. Now, of course, we can try to work things out even more deeply, but let's have a look. Black is even material up for the exchange. There are free pawns, but more importantly, Black's king is safe, the files are still closed, and it's likely Black was going to give checkmate here. So that's, of course, a very dangerous thing to do, that whenever you're already material up and your king is in trouble, to capture more material, you got to find a good balance between having a material advantage and enough resources to keep your king defended. So bishop takes c8 is not a good move, but we understand now what is going on. Black is really intending to take on f4. So the bishop is under threat, and we see that also the bishop on f6 may become a strong piece. So what about the move like bishop g5? Well, in that case, we actually forgot about the fact that there is even another threat in the position. So just starting with looking at moves is not a good thing to do in general. There is queen takes c2 with check, and after king takes a1, king to a1, there is, for instance, a nice move like rook c3, when it becomes really difficult to deal with that threat of rook takes. Hello everyone, I'm happy to have you here on board with me for this 2-volume DVD series on calculation in attack and defense. Actually, I have recorded already one DVD on calculation training. The following example rook takes c8. Now Black has various options. He may even consider to take back on c8 with the rook, but definitely much stronger is to take first on f4, also capturing a piece, and more important.
ඔයාලා මතක තියාගන්න මම මේක දෙන්නේ මේ වගේ මේ පිරිසාව හැදිච්ච නිසා මට කතා කරන්න යනවා මේක නිසා. ඒක නිසා තමයි මම මේ වීඩියෝ එක අද දැම්මේ. රයිට්? ඕකේ මොනවා හරි ඩවුට් එකක් ඔයාලට තියෙනවා නම් මට WhatsApp එකේ මැසේජ් එකක් එවන්න සහ මේක මම එක්ස්ප්ලেইন කරනවා next week එකේ. Okay?
The threatening checkmate. Now the diagonal has opened for the dark squared bishop. White should move the king to c1, but in that case, it's just time to pick up the bishop on c8. Now, of course, we can try to work things out even more deeply, but let's have a look. Black is even material up for the exchange. There are free pawns, but more importantly, Black's king is safe, the files are still closed, and it's likely Black was going to give checkmate here. So that's, of course, a very dangerous thing to do, that whenever you're already material up and your king is in trouble, to capture more material, you've got to find a good balance between having a material advantage and enough resources to keep your king defended. So bishop takes c8 is not a good move, but we understand now what is going on. Black is really intending to take on f4. So the bishop is under threat, and we see that also the bishop on f6 may become a strong piece. So what about the move like bishop g5? Well, in that case, we actually forgot about the fact that there is even another threat in the position. So just starting with looking at moves is not a good thing to do in general. There is queen takes c2 with check, and after king takes a1, king to a1, there is, for instance, a nice move like rook c3, when it becomes really difficult to deal with that threat of rook takes a3. If you go bishop to c1, I would say a simple move here is something like rook to b3, and now that b1 square is is undefendable. In all these lines, we see that actually white even didn't really get a chance to play for mate, as like in the Dominguez-Giri example, that bishop is both a great defender as well as an attacking piece. So no chance for white to give checkmate. Understanding what is going on in the position it's very important. So we see that there are various problems. The pawn on c2, but also the bishop on f4. And now we can't defend against all of it. But what we can do is try to neutralize one threat, in allowing the opponent to capture back the material. But then we would definitely hope that we can organize our defense or even set up a counter threat. Well, from that perspective, there is one very nice move here for white, as he can drop back with the bishop to e4. And such backward moves, they are really, really hard, especially in open positions when it's about king safety, grabbing material. Such a move is really difficult to see. But it's very efficient because the bishop covers the pawn on c2. Now the most obvious continuation for black would be to capture the bishop, restoring the material balance, opening the diagonal, and hence threatening to give checkmate either on a1 or b2. That is a very convincing line. So the question is, what has white achieved with this move? Well, finally, there is a chance for white to give a new check, and that's why the move bishop e4 is so strong. There is this possibility to take on h7. And this is a crushing idea, in fact, because with the queen on g1 and the rook on h1, white was craving for the opening of these open files towards the black king. The point is that if you take on h7, there is h takes g7 with check, and after the king goes back to g8, we play the move rook h8, and it's game over. Very nice and convincing idea. Obviously, in such positions, the opponent should try to do its utmost to keep the files closed as long as possible. And from that perspective, king h8 might be more sensible. But after h takes g7, bishop takes g7, it seems like white has various discovery checks. And let's say bishop f5 is a good one. But after king g8, of course, we are still not looking for the possibility to take on c8, winning material, because it will be checkmate. So we still sense the urgency of playing really fast here. And that's why we need to keep looking at checks. So bishop h7 is, of course, the most obvious move. But the problem is that that will only lead to a repetition of moves. There's even a second possibility, as rather than repeating the moves, white can give a check on h8, forcing the black to take with the king, because the bishop is pinned, obviously. So king takes, and now we bring the queen to the h file. Queen h1, queen h2, whatever. And after going with the king to g8, it's going to be checkmate on h7. Only black could have postponed that checkmate by sacrificing the queen and the bishop, but it will lead to mate in any case. This is a beautiful line. As I said, I believe it's really difficult to see such moves, but to give pieces various functions, various tasks, both in the attack and defense, it's really an economical way for yourself to organize your position optimally. That's what we get to see in most of these questions. Not like you need it in every position, but in various lines, of course, it got to be considered to create some double tasks for the pieces. So that's what this bishop e4 is about. I should add that apart from the move e takes f4, black isn't obliged to capture on f4 the bishop. But if he would decide to play a move like g6 to prevent ideas like bishop takes h7 or g takes h takes g7, now white finally gets time to improve his bishop, to save the bishop, and I would certainly retreat it to c1 with the idea to consolidate my king's position, followed by bishop b2. The bishop on f6 will remain out of play. There are no huge threats. So to me, this seems like it's so. Yeah, that's basically it. Let me see. I thought there was one other idea I wanted to show you. Well, no, it's all about understanding also the opponent's threats. If you take on g7 with the idea to open the files, there's no need to react to that move because of queen takes c2, king a1, and that position is just going to fall apart. So yeah, that's basically it. And of course, the same can be said for a move like bishop d2. Now you again you've got to face the move queen takes c2, followed by e4, and checkmate follows. Keep that in mind. Try to get the most out of your pieces, and combining attack and defense is a recurring theme on these two DVDs. Trying to solve these puzzles. That kind of approach will certainly help you to give your game a huge boost. In the next example, I would like to have a look with you at the game played between two players who are going to play the World Championship match later in the year in Dubai. With the white pieces in this position, it's c1-en against Magnus Carlsen, played in the Skilling Open last year in 2020. Well, we have a very original position, and first of all, white is a piece up, but it's not every day that you see a white king ending up on f4, and likely it's not really going to end there actually, because well, with such a king, you got to expect that white will try to do everything to bring his king back into safety. At the same time, black will try to keep creating new threats to challenge the king, but at the same time, we also should look for ways challenging the other pieces. So just before we are looking at concretely at moves, which is of course one of the most important things to do, let's also mention that apart from the exposed king on f4, the rook on d2 is unprotected, as well as the queen on e8. That will definitely help you finding the better move black here, as Magnus played a very obvious move, but it's not the best one. Let's first have a look at what Magnus did, and in the meantime, you can also think about what you can do instead. Black here played the move bishop takes f2, getting a second pawn for the piece. And more importantly, it also opens up the path for the queen to enter on e3 with check, double attack the king and rook. Also, bishop e3 is definitely an option. And I assume there are various possibilities here for white. But when I would be playing here with white, the first thing which would cross my mind is let's bring the king into a safer place. And for that reason, the move king g4 was played by Nepomniachtchi. I think that's a good move, because if you give another check with h5, I will go to h3, and it seems to me that white is kind of consolidating his position. Also, the main point of already anticipating the check on e3 is that if you were here to play the move queen e3, attacking the rook, looking for ways to generate new threats, there's the simple response of queen takes f7. That's of course something we should have seen in advance as well, with the queen on a7. Black was still protecting that pawn on f7, but now that's no longer the case. It looks as if you're simply winning here as white. Okay, after king to g4, rather than giving a check, black tried to set up stronger threats against the white king. Played here the move rook to f6, and that is actually quite an interesting idea, because that king doesn't feel really comfortable. And if you would play something like queen e5, pinning that rook on f6, I guess that would just follow queen d7. And I'm not sure what is happening after king to h4, but something like h6 already feels really unpleasant, with ideas to play g5 and queen h3 coming in. So yeah, we are not out of the woods here yet. Don't forget that king is in huge trouble. So after rook f6, I think white really got to think about what to do to get out of these checks. For instance, if you would play king h3 here, very logical move. But then the problem is there is bishop takes g3, and now after taking back with the pawn, I see that the queen is coming in to g1, for instance, and here again we see a number of checks popping up. For instance, if you play queen e5 to pin the rook, there is already queen h1, and after rook h2 it is queen f1, and well, likely white doesn't have much better than repeating the moves, because you can also go too far. Let's say if you go king g4, I would play h5, and now after the move king to g5, there is queen to f3, and here we see what kind of damage has been done to the white king. White is a piece up, but in all the moves we have seen so far, that bishop on d5 didn't play any particular role, and well, I guess there's not much you can do against the mating threat on g4. Let's go back. After the position after rook f6, a much better idea for white would be here instead to play the move e5, attacking the rook, but also maintaining that queen on e8, so that at least for the moment black doesn't have a way to include his own pieces into the attack. We have already been discussing that in one of the other videos. It's very important to play with all your pieces, but now the rook is under threat. The queen cannot really join with check. So in order to keep fighting for the momentum, something like h5 should be tried, which was played by Magnus. After king h3, there followed the move rook f4, and again it looks very dangerous, but perception is not everything. It's like it's like there's not much to do here with the major pieces. And after something like e6, you're opening up black's king instead. Everything has been neutral. After taking on e6, there is bishop takes, and interestingly, it's white who is currently taking over the attack against the black king. So the game lasted a couple of more moves, but then it was just game over. So what is going wrong for black? Well, first of all, it's not really strange that when you're a piece down that things are going wrong. But what is wrong about that move bishop takes f2 is that it's basically you're creating a single threat, which is the check on e3. And when there's one single threat, it's much easier for the opponent to deal with that. let's go back, because instead of bishop takes f2, there is a very nice idea. And I don't want to play here the move h5, because I would say that the king is coming back to f3 and to g2, and it will be likely game over. So that is not the right continuation. And also, something like rook f6 can just be met by king to g4. And this looks very similar. In fact, after bishop takes f2, we will get a transposition to the game after the move e5. So that doesn't create anything new. But also after other moves, let's say if you would play here the move queen c7, I would say the only threat, if it is already a big threat, is to give a check on f4 with one of these pieces. The simple way to meet these ideas is to play e5 here yourself, forcing the rook to leave to an inferior square, and that gives white some chance to breathe again. So that is basically queen c7. If you if you would play h5, again the king escapes. So now we have seen some critical moves, but not the right one. The most critical move here for black is to set up a dual threat, and you can do that by playing the move queen c7, which is an excellent move and was not played in the game, as I said. But what is the point? First of all, the easiest thing to spot is that white is about to give a discovery by either taking on d5 or playing rook e6. So that is what black is intending to do now. How to react to this move? You can do various things. You can move your king away. Let's say you play king to f3, and it looks as if the threat is over. But we are not only focusing on the king, we keep an eye on all the facets of this position. And now there is a beautiful idea to trap the queen with the move rook d8. So this is the point. We are threatening the king, but at the same time preparing the move rook d8 to challenge the queen. The queen is caught, cannot go to c6, because after queen takes c6, bishop takes c6, we have already seen that the rook on d2 is unprotected, and that would win in the end an exchange for black. So there's hardly you can do anything. Also, queen f7 doesn't save the position for white, obviously. So no chance to play king to f3. But what should black do then? What should white do then instead? Also after e5, threatening the rook, there is rook to d8, and the problems remain similar. Okay, of course, one of the reasons probably Magnus rejected the move queen c7 is that he saw there is the move queen e5, check. And whenever your opponent gives a check, it's already sort of problematic. But isn't it possible to play rook f6 here? Answering a check with a counter check. This is a fantastic tool for exploiting and take over the initiative. So it looks as if you're winning the queen, but look what you can do here. There is this move, knight f5, counter check. So check, counter check, another counter check. This is very exciting sort of tactic, which is kind of unusual, but it's definitely beautiful. After g takes f5, the point is that the queen on c7 is hanging, and black didn't get a chance to win the queen. Of course, rook takes f5. Another counter check is simply not allowed because the rook is pinned. So in this case, you're winning the queen as white. That might have been a sort of deception, and I wouldn't be surprised Magnus had seen all of this and reacted the move queen e5 based on this tactical shot. But what he didn't consider is that after queen e5, there is another move, f6. Again, we are fighting for the initiative. We are piece down, but we are threatening the queen, and the queen got to move. There are not too many options here. The queen got to move away. Let's say it goes to c3, but now the queen is no longer defending the king, and black can actually already take on d5. He has his piece back after king to f3. The point is that we can simply take, for instance, on d2, rook takes d2, queen takes d2, and well, we're ending up in a situation where, as they say, the rest is technique. Of course, these kind of situations are not that simple at all, but you can understand that with a better pawn structure, an extra pawn for black, also a bishop against a knight in an open position with play on both wings, black is clearly better, but it remains tricky, and you gotta be alert till the end of the game. But definitely, this is winning for black. Yeah, I think this is really fascinating stuff. Queen c7, it's a difficult move to see, but it starts also with the idea to what is vulnerable in my opponent's position. The king on f4 stands out, but also unprotected pieces are vulnerable, especially in the battle for the initiative. Attacking opponent's pieces is an important thing to consider, and remember that multiple threats are generally much stronger than setting up a single threat. And that's why Magnus lost this position. If he would have considered a little bit some more options, he could probably have found this move queen c7 based on some calculation. It would win back material. Not an easy line, but definitely some important tools for you to consider when solving the exercises.
right. අද මම මෙතන ඉවර කරනවා දරුවනේ. right කාල වේලාවත් හරි. එහෙනම් අපි ලබන සතියේ මේක මම සාකච්ඡා කරන්නම්. ඔයාලා තේරුම් ගනී කියලා හිතනවා. හේතුව ක්ලාසස් වලට ඔයාලා ජොයින් වෙන්නේ සහ මම දාන වීඩියෝස් නේ ඔයාලා බලන්නේ. එතකොට මොන හරි ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා නම් මට මෙසේජ් එකක් දාන්න. ඔයාලට යම්කිසි ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා නම් ක්ලාසස් වල ටයිම් එක කරුණාකරලා ඒක මට කියන්න. right okay එහෙනම් බුදුසරණයි. God bless you. අපිට ලබන සතියේ හම්බ වෙමු. ජය වේවා.